History books will tell you that the marriage between Lady Isolde Calloway and the Earl of Stirling was a tragedy of illness. They lied. The truth was buried in a soaked diary found in a grand estate in Yorkshire nearly a century later. It wasn't illness that destroyed the wedding of the decade. It was a debt, a mistress, and a single rainy night in October 1889. On the night she was meant to become a countess, Isolde didn't sleep in a feather bed. She was walking the cobblestones of London mud, staining her silk train, until a man the world had forgotten, a duke's mere bodyguard, did the one thing her husband refused to do. He knelt. This is the true unsanitized story of the scandal that the British aristocracy tried to burn. October 14th, 1889. London. The air inside St. George's, Hanover Square, smelled of suffocating lilies and beeswax. To the 300 guests crammed into the pews, it looked like a fairy tale. Lady Isolde Calloway, the 20-year-old daughter of a destitute baron, was marrying Lord Alistair Stirling, the Earl of Hallowell. It was the perfect match, her beauty and ancient bloodline, for his immense, sprawling wealth, derived from railways and shipping. But to Isolde, the air didn't smell like a wedding. It smelled like a ledger. She stood before the mirror in the vestry, her hands trembling so violently that her maid, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Higgins, had to hold the hairpins steady. "Breathe, my lady," Mrs. Higgins whispered, adjusting the Brussels lace veil that had cost more than Isolde's father had earned in 10 years. "He is a handsome man. And the Hallowell estate. You will never want for anything again." Isolde looked at her reflection. She saw a ghost. Her skin was pale, her auburn hair pulled back too tightly. She had met Alistair Stirling exactly 4 times. On each occasion he had looked at her not with affection, but with the appraising eye of a man buying a racehorse. He checked her teeth, her gait, her lineage. "He does not love me." "Higgins," Isolde whispered, her voice barely a thread. "Love is a luxury for the poor lamb," Higgins replied sadly. "You are marrying for survival. Your father's debts." Isolde closed her eyes. The debts. Her father, Baron Calloway, had gambled away everything but the title. This marriage was the bailout. Alistair was paying off the creditors in exchange for a wife with a spotless reputation to help him secure a seat in the House of Lords. The ceremony was a blur of droning Latin and staring eyes. When Alistair slid the heavy gold band onto her finger, his hand was cold. He didn't smile. He looked past her toward the back of the church, where a woman in a striking crimson hat sat Lady Genevieve Vane, a widow known for her scandalous parties. Alistair's gaze lingered on her, a second too long, before returning to the priest. The reception was held at the Stirling townhouse in Mayfair. It was opulent to the point of vulgarity. Champagne flowed like water, but Isolde felt like she was swallowing glass. She stood by Alistair's side for 4 hours, her feet bleeding in her satin shoes. He spoke to her only once. "Stand up straight, Isolde," he hissed into her ear while waving to a duke. "You look like a wilted cabbage. I paid for a rose, not a weed." By midnight, the guests had departed. The townhouse fell silent save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the drumming of a sudden torrential downpour against the windows. Isolde sat on the edge of the massive 4-poster bed in the master suite, still in her wedding dress. She waited and waited. At 100 a.m., the door didn't open for a lover. It opened for a messenger. It was Alistair's valet, a man named Mr. Fenchurch, who looked as though he would rather be anywhere else on earth. He held a silver tray. On it lay a single folded letter and a key. "My lady," Fenchurch said, staring at the floor. His lordship has retired for the evening." "Retired?" Isolde stood up, the heavy silk of her dress rustling. "But it is our wedding night." "He has retired to the Dower House, my lady, across the city." The Dower House. Confusion clouded her mind. "But why?" "He asked me to give you this." Fenchurch extended the tray. Isolde took the letter. Her fingers shook as she broke the wax seal. The handwriting was sharp, jagged, and cruel. "Isolde, the transaction is complete. Your father's debts are cleared. You are now the Countess of Hallowell in name. That is all I required, the name and the respectability it brings for the upcoming election. Do not expect me in your bed. I have no interest in breathless, inexperienced girls. I am spending the night and likely the foreseeable future with Lady Genevieve, a woman who actually understands the needs of a man. You have the townhouse. You have your allowance. Stay out of my way. Be invisible and produce an heir when I eventually decide to visit you in a year or two. Until then, you are essentially a decorative piece of furniture. Do not attempt to follow me. Alistair." The paper slipped from her fingers. For a moment, there was no sound but the rain. Then a primal hot rage began to boil in her chest. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the erasure. He had bought her, used her name to clean his reputation, and then discarded her like wrapping paper on the very night she was supposed to be cherished. "He is with her," Isolde whispered. "Now." Fenchurch didn't answer, which was answer enough. Isolde looked around the room. The velvet curtains, the gilded mirrors, the silk sheets. It felt like a prison cell, a very expensive coffin. "I am not a piece of furniture," she said, her voice trembling, then hardening. "I am a Calloway." She looked at the key on the tray. It was the key to the safe where her dowry jewels were kept. She didn't touch it. Instead, she turned to the door. "My lady." Fenchurch stepped forward nervously. "Where are you going?" "You cannot leave. It is raining. It is your wedding night." "I have no husband, Mr. Fenchurch," Isolde said, grabbing a heavy wool cloak from the hook near the door and throwing it over her wedding dress. "So I have no wedding night." She didn't take a carriage. She didn't take a maid. She walked out of the front door of the Sterling mansion, the heavy oak slamming shut behind her, and stepped directly into the deluge. The rain in London was not clean water. It was a slurry of soot, coal dust, and horse manure. Within seconds, Isolde's pristine white lace train was grey and heavy, dragging behind her like an anchor. She didn't know where she was going. She just walked. She walked away from Mayfair, away from the lies blindly turning corners. The adrenaline that had pushed her out the door was fading, replaced by the biting cold of the October night. She found herself near the Thames, in a district that was far less respectable. The gas lamps here flickered dimly. Shadows stretched long and menacing. Drunken laughter echoed from alleyways. Isolde stopped leaning against a brick wall, gasping for breath. Her corset felt like a vice. Her satin shoes were ruined, soaked through to the skin. She looked down at herself, a bride in the gutter. The absurdity of it made her want to scream. "Well, well," a voice rasped from the darkness. Isolde froze. Two men stepped out from the fog. They were rough, wearing tattered coats, smelling of gin. "Looks like a runaway bird," the taller one sneered, eyeing the diamond necklace that still glittered around her throat, the only thing of value she had on her. "A very rich bird. Stay back." Isolde warned, though her voice lacked authority. She backed away, but her heel caught in a cobblestone crack. She stumbled, falling to her knees in the mud. "That necklace would feed us for a year," the second man said, drawing a small rusty knife. Isolde squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the metal for the end of a life that had barely begun. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of heavy, deliberate boots on stone cut through the rain. "I would rethink that," a deep baritone voice commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was a low rumble, calm and terrifyingly assured. The two attackers spun around. Standing 10 paces away, under the halo of a flickering street lamp, was a mountain of a man. He wore a long, dark greatcoat with the collar turned up. He held a black umbrella in one hand, but it wasn't open. He held it like a baton. "This ain't your business, Gov," the man with the knife spat. "A lady on her knees is everyone's business," the stranger said. He stepped forward. He moved with a strange grace for someone so large. The attacker lunged. What happened next was too fast for Isolde to track. The stranger sidestepped the umbrella, moving in a blur. There was a crack of wood against bone, a pained yelp, and the knife clattered into the gutter. The second man tried to swing a fist, but the stranger caught it, twisted, and shoved him into the muddy wall with effortless power. "Go," the stranger said, "before I lose my temper." The two thugs didn't hesitate. They scrambled over each other to flee into the darkness. Isolde remained on her knees, shivering violently, mud covering the front of her wedding dress. She couldn't stand. The shock had robbed her legs of strength. The stranger turned to her. Now that he was closer, she could see him. He was not a gentleman. He wore the uniform of a high-ranking private guard, gold braiding on the collar of his coat, a crest she didn't recognize on his lapel. He had dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain, a square jaw covered in rough stubble, and eyes that were a piercing, stormy grey. There was a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, giving him a dangerous edge. This was Silas Kincaid, the head of security for the Duke of Ashbourne, one of the most powerful and reclusive men in England. Silas was known in the underground fighting rings of London as the Iron Wall. He looked down at the shivering bride. Most men would have asked, "Who are you?" or "Why are you here?" Silas didn't ask. He saw the white dress. He saw the terror. He saw the loneliness. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered the umbrella. He ignored the mud. He ignored the fact that his uniform was immaculate. He dropped to one knee. He was eye level with her now. He didn't touch her. He knew better than to touch a frightened animal. Instead, he unbuttoned his heavy greatcoat, shrugging it off his broad shoulders. "My lady," he said softly. The roughness of his voice was gone, replaced by a gentle deference. "You are freezing." I have nowhere to go," Isolde stammered, her teeth chattering. "I cannot go back." "Then we will go forward," Silas said. He draped the massive warm coat over her shoulders. It smelled of tobacco, rain, and safety. He didn't stand up immediately. He stayed kneeling, forcing her to look him in the eye, proving to her that she was the one in power despite her position. "I am Silas Kincaid, guard to the Duke of Ashbourne. My carriage is just around the corner. I am not going to hurt you. I am going to get you out of the rain. May I help you stand?" He extended a hand. It was a large hand, calloused and scarred, a worker's hand. Isolde looked at his hand, then at the empty street where her husband should have been. Her husband, the Earl, had left her to drown. This stranger, a paid guard, was kneeling in the mud to save her. She reached out and placed her small gloved hand in his. "Yes," she whispered. Silas closed his fingers around hers, firm, protective, unbreakable. He pulled her up, and for the first time that night, Isolde felt the ground beneath her feet was solid. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, as he led her toward a black carriage bearing the Ashbourne crest. Silas opened the door for her. "To the only place in London where Alistair Sterling cannot reach you." October 15th, 1889. Ashbourne House. Isolde woke to the sensation of silk that wasn't her wedding dress. She was lying in a bed so vast it felt like a small island. The room was bathed in the soft grey light of a rainy London morning. The walls were lined with dark mahogany bookshelves, and a fire crackled warmly in the hearth. Someone had been tending it while she slept. Panic surged for a brief second. "Where am I?" She sat up. She was wearing a plain, oversized linen shirt that smelled faintly of lavender. Her ruined wedding dress was nowhere to be seen. The door creaked open. It wasn't Silas. It was an elderly maid carrying a tray of tea and toast. "Good morning, my lady," the maid said, her voice brisk but kind. "Mr. Kincaid said you were not to be disturbed until you woke on your own. I've brought breakfast." "Where is Mr. Kincaid?" Isolde asked, pulling the sheets up to her chin. "He is with the Duke in the library. He asks that you join them when you are ready. There are clothes in the wardrobe. They belong to the Duke's late sister, so they may be a bit out of fashion, but they are dry." Isolde dressed quickly in a navy blue day dress that was simple and severe. She caught her reflection in the mirror. The pale, frightened girl from the church was gone. In her place was someone harder, colder. The eyes staring back were wary. She made her way downstairs, guided by the footman to the library. Ashbourne House was different from the Sterling mansion. Sterling's home was all gold leaf and ostentatious statues meant to scream wealth. Ashbourne House was dark, quiet, and imposing. It felt like a fortress. When she entered the library, she saw two men. One was Silas Kincaid. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He was no longer in his guard's uniform, but in a simple grey suit that strained against his broad shoulders. The other man sat behind a massive desk. He was older, perhaps 60, with a shock of white hair and a face etched with deep lines of pain. He sat in a wheelchair. This was the Duke of Ashbourne, Julian Blackwood. "So," the Duke said, his voice raspy, "this is the runaway bride my guard dragged in from the gutter." Isolde stiffened. "I did not ask to be dragged, Your Grace, and I am not a runaway. I was discarded." Silas turned from the window. His grey eyes met hers, and for a moment the room felt smaller. "She has spirit, Your Grace. I told you. Spirit doesn't pay for the scandal you've brought to my door." "Kincaid," the Duke grumbled, though there was no real heat in it. He looked at Isolde. "Do you know what happened while you slept, Lady Hallowell?" "Please," Isolde said sharply, "do not call me that." "Very well. Lady Isolde, while you slept, London exploded. The Earl of Hallowell woke up to find his wife gone. He has already put out a notice. He claims you were taken by a fit of hysteria and wandered off. He has the police searching the Thames for a body." Isolde felt a chill. "He wants me dead." "No." Silas stepped forward, his voice low. "He wants you silent. If you are dead, he plays the grieving widower. If you are found alive and tell the world he abandoned you on your wedding night for a mistress, he loses his standing. He loses the election. He needs you back, or he needs you gone permanently." "I will not go back," Isolde said, her voice shaking. "We know," Silas said. He walked over to her, stopping a respectful distance away. "Which is why you are staying here." "Why?" Isolde asked, looking from the guard to the Duke. "Why would you help me?" "You don't know me. The Duke of Ashbourne is known for his privacy. Why risk a war with the Earl of Stirling for a stranger?" The Duke laughed, a dry, barking sound. "Tell her Kincaid." Silas hesitated. The hardness returned to his face. "Because Alistair Stirling didn't just abandon you, my lady. He is a thief. And 5 years ago he stole something from this house that destroyed the Duke's life. We have been waiting for a way to get close to him. You are that way." Isolde looked at Silas. The protector in the rain was gone. In his place was a man on a mission. "You saved me because I am useful. I saved you because it was the right thing to do," Silas said softly, his eyes softening again. "But we are keeping you because we need your help, and you need ours. We can protect you from Stirling, but in exchange we need you to tell us everything you know about his finances, specifically about a red ledger he keeps in his private safe." Isolde's mind flashed back to the letter. The key to the safe. "I don't have the ledger," she whispered. "But I have the key." She reached into the pocket of the navy dress. She had transferred it from her wedding gown the night before, an instinct she couldn't explain. She held up the small, intricate brass key. The Duke's eyes went wide. Silas let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. "That," Silas said, looking at the key as if it were a holy relic, "is the key to his private study at the Dower House. That is where he keeps his secrets." "And his mistress," Isolde added bitterly. "Exactly," Silas said. "Tonight the Earl is hosting a celebratory dinner at his club. He thinks you are dead or wandering the streets. He will not be at the Dower House, but the mistress, Lady Genevieve, will be." "What are you proposing?" Isolde asked. "A heist," Silas said. "I go in, I get the ledger, I get out, but I can't get into the Dower House without an entry. The servants know me. They know the Duke's men." "They don't know me," Isolde said. The realization hit her. "You want me to walk into the house where my husband is keeping his mistress?" "No." Silas shook his head immediately. "It's too dangerous. I won't ask that of you." "I will do it," Isolde said. Her fear was being replaced by a cold, sharp anger. Alistair thought she was a wilted cabbage. He thought she was a piece of furniture. She would show him exactly what kind of furniture she was. "I will distract Lady Genevieve. You get the ledger." Silas looked at her, searching her face for hesitation. He found none. "Very well. But you stay within my sight. If I say we run, we run." "Agreed." October 15th, 1889. The Dower House. The Dower House was a smaller, more intimate property on the edge of Kensington. It was where the Stirling family parked their widows and apparently their mistresses. The rain had stopped, but the fog was thick. Silas and Isolde arrived in a nondescript carriage. Silas was dressed in black, a flat cap pulled low over his eyes. Isolde wore a hooded cloak over her dress. "The back entrance?" Silas whispered as they crouched by the garden gate. "The cook sells leftovers to the poor at this hour. The gate will be unlocked." They slipped into the garden. It was overgrown, neglected, a stark contrast to the manicured lawns of the main estate. They moved like shadows. Isolde was surprised by how naturally she moved with him. Silas was constantly aware of her, his hand hovering near her elbow to steady her, his body shielding her from the wind. They reached the French doors of the drawing room. Silas picked the lock in seconds with a thin metal wire. Inside the house smelled of heavy perfume and stale cigar smoke. "The study is upstairs," Isolde whispered. "Fenchurch told me." "Stay close," Silas murmured. They crept up the stairs. The floorboards groaned. They froze. From down the hallway, a woman's laugh rang out. It was a throaty, confident laugh. "Lady Genevieve." "He's such a bore, darling." Genevieve's voice drifted from the master bedroom. "But his money spends just fine. And that little wife of his vanished. Probably drowned herself like a good little martyr." Isolde's hands balled into fists. Silas placed a warm, firm hand over hers. His touch grounded her. "Focus his eyes," said. They reached the study door. Locked. Isolde handed Silas the brass key. He inserted it. It turned with a satisfying click. The study was chaotic. Papers were strewn everywhere. It looked less like a workspace and more like a crime scene. "Search the desk," Silas ordered in a whisper. "I'll check the wall safe." Isolde began sifting through the papers. Bills. Gambling debts. More bills. Alistair wasn't just wealthy. He was hemorrhaging money. He was leveraging one debt to pay another. "Found it," Silas hissed. He was kneeling by a painting of a fox hunt that he had swung away from the wall. Behind it was a safe. He didn't need a combination. The door was already slightly ajar. He pulled out a thick red leather book. "The Blackwood Ledger," he said, flipping it open. Proof that Alistair embezzled the funds for the Great Western Railway expansion. Proof that he framed the Duke's son for it. "The Duke's son?" Isolde asked. "Julian's son, my best friend." Silas said, his voice tight. "He killed himself in prison because of this book. Alistair stole the money, cooked the books, and planted them on Arthur." Isolde stared at the ledger. This wasn't just financial fraud. It was murder by proxy. Suddenly the floorboards in the hallway creaked, loudly. "Did you hear that?" Genevieve's voice. "Someone is upstairs." "Probably the cat," a male voice replied. Isolde froze. That wasn't a servant. That was Alistair. "He's here," she mouthed to Silas. "He came back." Silas's eyes went wide. "We need to go. Now." They moved to the window. It was a 20-foot drop to the garden. "Too high for you?" Silas assessed instantly. "We have to hide." The doorknob rattled. "Who's in there?" Alistair roared. There was no time. Silas grabbed Isolde and pulled her into the narrow space behind the heavy velvet drapes of the window, just as the door burst open. Alistair stormed in, followed by Genevieve in a silk dressing gown. He was holding a revolver. "I know someone is in here," Alistair shouted. He looked around the room. He saw the painting swung open. He saw the empty safe. "The ledger!" he screamed. "It's gone!" He ran to the desk, throwing papers aside. "If that book gets out, I hang. Do you understand? I hang." Genevieve looked bored. "Calm down, Alistair. Who could have taken it?" "Only one man knows about that book," Alistair snarled. "Ashbourne, or his dog Kincaid." He began to pace, coming dangerously close to the curtains. Isolde held her breath. She could smell the brandy on his breath. She pressed her back against Silas's chest. He was rigid, his muscles coiled like springs. One hand was wrapped around her waist, protective. The other rested on a knife at his belt. "Search the grounds," Alistair yelled out the door to his servants. "Wake everyone up." He turned back to Genevieve. "I'm going to the Ashbourne estate. Tonight. If Kincaid has that book, I'll burn the damn house down with him in it." Alistair stormed out. Genevieve followed, looking annoyed at the interruption. The room fell silent. Silas waited a full minute before exhaling. He pulled the curtain back. "He's going to the Duke," Silas said, his face pale. "The Duke is alone. The servants are off for the night." "We have to beat him there," Isolde said. "We can't," Silas said, looking out the window. "He took the carriage. We're on foot." Isolde looked at the ledger in Silas's hand. Then she looked at the fireplace. "We don't need to beat him there," she said, a dangerous idea forming. "We need to make him come back here." "How so?" Isolde walked over to the desk. She grabbed a heavy crystal decanter of brandy and smashed it against the curtains. The amber liquid soaked the velvet. "What are you doing?" Silas asked, shocked. "He said he'd burn the house down," Isolde said, striking a match from the desk. "Let's see how he likes it when it's his own scandal going up in flames." She dropped the match. The alcohol-soaked velvet caught instantly. Fire roared up the wall. "Isolde!" Silas grabbed her arm. "Are you mad? I'm done being a victim, Silas," she said, her eyes reflecting the flames. "Fire is the only thing men like him understand." Silas looked at her. Really looked at her. In the light of the fire, she wasn't a fragile baron's daughter. She was a force of nature. And for the first time, he felt something other than duty. He felt awe. "Then let it burn," he said. He grabbed her hand and they ran. They ran down the stairs, past the confused servants who were starting to smell the smoke, and out into the cool night air. Behind them, the dower house, the symbol of Alistair's betrayal and corruption, began to glow orange against the dark sky. As they reached the street, sirens began to wail in the distance. Silas pulled her into an alleyway, pressing her against the brick wall to hide from a passing police wagon. They were breathing hard, chests heaving. They were inches apart. The heat of the fire was still on their skin. The danger had stripped away all propriety. "You represent trouble, Isolde Calloway," Silas whispered, his voice rough. "I am Isolde Sterling," she corrected, breathless. "Unfortunately." "Not for long," Silas promised. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He didn't kiss her. It was too soon, too dangerous. But he raised his hand and brushed a smudge of soot from her cheek. His thumb lingered on her skin. The gesture was more intimate than anything she had ever experienced with the man she had married. "We have the book," Silas said, pulling away, his professionalism returning. "Now we destroy him." But as they walked away from the burning house, Isolde knew the investigation was far from over. Alistair was desperate now, and a desperate man was capable of anything. October 17th, 1889. A safe house in Lambeth. The fire at the dower house made the front page of every newspaper in London. Mystery blaze in Kensington. Earl's private residence destroyed. The articles speculated wildly. Anarchists, a gas leak, a disgruntled servant. None of them mentioned a missing wife or a stolen ledger. Isolde sat at a small, scarred wooden table in the safe house Silas had brought her to. It was a cramped room above a bakery in Lambeth, smelling of yeast and coal smoke. It was a far cry from Mayfair, but to Isolde it felt like the first honest place she had ever lived. Silas was cleaning his revolver by the window. He hadn't slept in 2 days. He had been watching the street, waiting for Alistair's men. "The Duke sent word," Silas said, not looking up from the weapon. "Alistair is claiming the ledger was destroyed in the fire. He thinks he's safe. He's moving forward with his bid for the seat in the House of Lords. The vote is in 3 days. "He thinks I'm dead," Isolde said, tracing the grain of the wood on the table. "He hopes you're dead," Silas corrected. He snapped the cylinder of the revolver back into place. But he's scared. He has hired half the Bow Street runners to find you. He's putting it about that you are mentally unstable, that you suffered a nervous collapse on your wedding night and wandered off. Isolde laughed bitterly. The oldest trick in the book. If I speak, I'm a mad woman. If I stay silent, I'm a victim. Silas walked over to the table. He looked exhausted. The stubble on his jaw was thicker, and dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes. He placed the gun on the table and sat opposite her. "We have the ledger," Silas said, "but a book isn't enough. In this world, the word of a powerful earl outweighs a book of numbers. We need a witness, someone who can stand up in front of the lords and translate those numbers into crimes." "You," Isolde said. "A bodyguard." Silas shook his head. "They won't listen to me. I'm hired muscle. I'm nobody." "You are the man who saved me," Isolde said fiercely. She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. His skin was rough, warm, and alive. "You are more of a gentleman than Alistair Sterling will ever be." Silas went still. He looked down at their joined hands. For a man who lived his life in violence and shadows, her touch seemed to stun him. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with hers. The fit was perfect. "Isolde," he said, his voice dropping to a rumble, "do you understand what happens when we expose him? Your name will be dragged through the mud. You will be the runaway countess. You will be divorced, disgraced. You will never be accepted in society again." "Society sold me to a monster," Isolde said, her eyes locking with his. "I don't want society. I want freedom. And I want—" She stopped. "What do you want?" Silas whispered. He leaned in closer. The air in the small room grew heavy, charged with the electricity of two people who had survived a fire together. "I want to know that when I walk in the rain, someone will be there to hold the umbrella," she said softly. Silas didn't speak. He stood up slowly, pulling her up with him. He cupped her face in his large hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. He looked at her as if she were the only source of light in a dark city. "I will hold the umbrella," he vowed. "I will hold the sky up if I have to." He lowered his head. His lips brushed hers, tentative at first, a question. When she didn't pull away, he kissed her. It wasn't a chaste, polite kiss. It was desperate, fueled by adrenaline and a hunger that had been building since the moment he saw her in the mud. It tasted of danger and promise. For a moment, the world outside the Earl, the debts, the scandal ceased to exist. There was only the heat of his body and the strength of his arms around her. A sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. Silas pulled away instantly, the soldier returning. He grabbed the revolver. "Who is it?" "It's Higgins." A muffled voice came through the door. Isolde gasped. "My maid." Silas opened the door a crack. Weapon raised, Mrs. Higgins stood there clutching a shawl, looking terrified. Behind her was one of the Duke's footmen. "Oh, my lady!" Higgins sobbed, rushing into the room and embracing Isolde. "Thank God, I thought he had killed you." "Higgins, how did you find us?" Isolde asked, stroking the old woman's back. "The Duke sent for me." Higgins sniffled. "But I had to come. You need to know, Lord Sterling, he isn't just looking for you. He has a Dr. Thorne from the Bedlam Asylum. He has signed papers, my lady. Papers to have you committed the moment you are found." Isolde went cold. In Victorian England, a husband could commit his wife with a signature. Once she was in Bedlam, she would never be heard from again. "He wants to bury me alive," Isolde whispered. Silas's face hardened into a mask of pure fury. "He won't get the chance. What do we do?" Isolde asked. Silas looked at the calendar on the wall. "Tomorrow night is the Prime Minister's gala at the Royal Opera House. Alistair will be there. He's trying to court the Prime Minister's favor for the vote. He'll be surrounded by guards," Higgins warned. "Good," Silas said. "That means there will be an audience." He turned to Isolde. "He wants to claim you are insane. Let's show them exactly how sane you are. We aren't going to hide anymore. We are going to the opera." October 18th, 1889. The Royal Opera House. The Royal Opera House was a cathedral of velvet and gold. The elite of London society were packed into the boxes, diamonds glittering under the massive chandeliers. On stage, a soprano was singing a tragic aria, but the real drama was in the royal box. Alistair Sterling sat in the front row, looking every inch the grieving, stressed nobleman. He wore black. Next to him, boldly sat Lady Genevieve. It was a scandal, but Alistair was so rich and powerful that no one dared to whisper too loudly. "You look tense, darling," Genevieve whispered, fanning herself. "I haven't found her." Alistair hissed his eyes, scanning the crowd below. "If she shows up—" "She won't," Genevieve soothed. "She's a frightened little mouse. She's probably halfway to France by now." The aria ended. Thunderous applause filled the hall. The house lights came up for the intermission. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the grand parterre swung open with a resounding boom. The chatter died instantly. Standing in the doorway was not a mouse. Isolde Calloway stood there. She was not wearing rags. She was wearing a gown of deep midnight blue velvet, a gown the Duke of Ashbourne had commissioned for her overnight. It was cut in a style that was regal, almost armor-like. Around her neck, the diamond necklace she had fled with glittered like ice. She was not alone. To her right stood the Duke of Ashbourne, Julian Blackwood, in his wheelchair, looking like an vengeful emperor. To her left stood Silas Kincaid. He wore formal evening wear, but he didn't look tamed. He looked like a wolf in a suit. He stood a half step behind her, his eyes scanning the balcony, locking instantly onto Alistair. A gasp went through the crowd. The missing Countess. Alive. "Alistair," Isolde's voice rang out. She didn't shout, but in the acoustic perfection of the opera house, her voice carried to the rafters. Alistair stood up in his box, his face draining of blood. "Isolde, you are unwell. Seize her. She is hysterical." He gestured frantically to the police officers stationed at the exits. "She has escaped her doctors. Grab her." Two officers moved toward her. Silas stepped forward. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply stood in their path, crossing his massive arms. The officers stopped. No one wanted to be the first to touch the iron wall. "I am not hysterical, Alistair," Isolde said, walking down the center aisle. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. "And I am not unwell. I am simply enlightened." She reached the center of the hall, directly beneath the royal box. She looked up at her husband and his mistress. "You told the world I ran away," Isolde said. "You forgot to mention why. You forgot to mention the letter you sent me on our wedding night." She pulled the crumpled letter from her bodice. "Lies!" Alistair screamed, gripping the velvet railing of the box. "She is mad. She is hallucinating." And this, Isolde, produced the red ledger. The silence in the opera house was absolute. Even the breathing seemed to stop. "The Blackwood Ledger," Isolde announced. "The record of how you stole the railway funds. The record of how you framed Arthur Blackwood. And—" she paused, her eyes shifting to Genevieve. "The record of your payments to a certain lady for her silence regarding your first wife's suspicious death." That was the twist no one saw coming. The crowd erupted into whispers. Genevieve recoiled from Alistair as if he were radioactive. "You fool," Genevieve hissed. "You said you burned those records." "I thought I did," Alistair shouted. "Enough," a voice boomed from the back. The Prime Minister himself stood up from his box. He looked down at Alistair with cold fury. "Lord Stirling, I believe we need to have a conversation with the police." Alistair looked around. He was trapped. The society that had protected him was now looking at him with disgust. He looked at Isolde, standing tall, beautiful, and untouchable. And he looked at Silas, the guard who dared to look at a countess with love. The humiliation broke him. "No," Alistair screamed. He pulled a small Derringer pistol from his coat pocket. Screams erupted. He wasn't aiming at the police. He was aiming at Isolde. "If I go down, you come with me." Bang! The shot rang out. Isolde flinched, closing her eyes, waiting for the pain. It never came. She opened her eyes. Silas was in front of her. He had moved with that impossible blurring speed. He stood with his back to her, shielding her body with his own. He swayed slightly. "Silas," she whispered. Silas looked up at the balcony. His face was pale, but his eyes were burning. He reached into his shoulder. His hand came away red. "You missed the heart, you coward," Silas growled at Alistair. Before Alistair could fire again, the doors to his box were kicked open. 3 officers tackled him to the ground. Genevieve was screaming. Isolde didn't care about Alistair. She didn't care about the ledger. She grabbed Silas as his knees buckled. "Silas, no, no, no." She fell to the floor with him catching his weight. The midnight blue dress began to stain dark crimson. It's just a scratch," Silas rasped, wincing. "Shoulder, through and through." "Help him!" Isolde screamed at the frozen crowd. "Someone help him!" The Duke of Ashbourne wheeled himself forward, barking orders. "Get a surgeon. Now if this man dies, I will buy this opera house and burn it to the ground." Silas reached up his bloody hand, touching Isolde's cheek. He smiled a weak, crooked smile. "I told you," he whispered. "I'd hold the umbrella." Isolde wept, pressing her forehead against his. "You idiot! You brave, wonderful idiot!" As the chaos swirled around them, Alistair being dragged away in handcuffs, the Prime Minister shouting orders, the flashes of early press cameras popping. Isolde Calloway didn't look at any of it. She only saw the man in her arms. The transaction was over. The romance had begun. November 4th, 1889. Ashbourne House. The fever was worse than the bullet. For 3 weeks, Silas Kincaid burned. The infection had set in 2 days after the shooting, turning the strongest man Isolde had ever known into a thrashing, delirious shadow. The Duke's physicians, the best in London, came and went with grim faces. They spoke of sepsis and constitutions. They bled him. They packed him in ice. They whispered in the hallway that it would be a mercy if he passed in his sleep. Isolde fired them all. She took over the sick room herself. She who had been raised to embroider and pour tea, stripped off her silk cuffs and learned to clean a wound. She slept in a chair by his bed, waking at every ragged breath he took. She force-fed him broth when he refused to swallow. She sponged his burning skin with vinegar and water until her own hands were raw. "You do not get to leave me," she whispered to him on the 14th night, the worst night. Outside, a winter storm battered the windows, reminding her of the night they met. "You walked into the rain for me, Silas. You do not get to die in a warm bed. Wake up." He didn't wake up, but he didn't die. By the 4th week, the fever broke. It happened at dawn. The grey light of London was filtering through the curtains. Isolde had fallen asleep with her head on the mattress, her hand resting on his uninjured shoulder. She felt a movement, a slight shift. She jerked awake. Silas's eyes were open. They were sunken, rimmed with red, but the delirium was gone. The stormy grey was clear. "Isolde," he rasped. His voice sounded like grinding stones. "I'm here." She choked out tears, instantly spilling over. "I'm right here. You look—" He tried to smile, but he was too weak. "You look terrible." Isolde laughed, a wet, sobbing sound. "I haven't slept in a month. You are a very difficult patient, Mr. Kincaid." "Did we—" He coughed, wincing as the pain flared in his healing shoulder. "Did we win?" Isolde's face hardened, not with anger, but with a fierce, triumphant satisfaction. "Rest, Silas," she said, smoothing the hair back from his damp forehead. "Get your strength back, because when you are well, I have a trial to take you to." December 10th, 1889. The Old Bailey. The trial of the Earl of Hallowell was the spectacle of the century. The courtroom was packed so tightly that the bailiffs had to turn away 3 dukes and a foreign prince. Alistair Sterling sat in the dock. He looked diminished. Without his tailors, his valets, and his arrogance, he was just a small, pale man with shaking hands. He was charged with embezzlement, fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. But the charge that had the gallery buzzing wasn't on the official docket. It was the moral charge. The charge of abandoning a bride on her wedding night. Isolde took the stand. She wore black. Not mourning black, but a sharp, formidable charcoal. She didn't wear a veil. She wanted them to see her face. The defense barrister, a slimy man named Mr. Craddock, tried to tear her apart. "Lady Hallowell," Craddock sneered, adjusting his wig. "Is it not true that you have been living under the roof of the Duke of Ashbourne in the company of his unmarried bodyguard, Mr. Kincaid?" "It is true," Isolde said clearly. "And is it not true," Craddock continued, playing to the crowd, "that this arrangement is improper? Perhaps the reason you ran away that night was not fear, but a pre-existing dalliance with this rough guard." The gallery murmured. This was the narrative Alistair wanted the adulterous wife. Isolde looked at the jury. 12 men. Stern Victorian men. "I did not run away to a lover," Isolde said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "I ran away because my husband. The man sitting there sent me a letter telling me I was a piece of furniture he had purchased. He told me he would be with his mistress. I walked into the rain with nothing but the clothes on my back. Mr. Kincaid found me in the gutter, being held at knife point. He did not touch me. He gave me his coat. He gave me his protection. He gave me the honor that my husband lacked." She turned her gaze to Alistair. He couldn't meet her eyes. "You ask if my arrangement is improper." Isolde continued, her voice rising. "I ask you, gentlemen of the jury, what is more improper, a woman finding sanctuary with a man who took a bullet for her, or a husband who steals railway pensions to buy diamond necklaces for his mistress. She produced the ledger, or rather the verified copy of it. This book proves that Lord Stirling stole from widows and orphans. He framed Arthur Blackwood, an innocent man, driving him to suicide. He tried to kill me. He tried to kill Silas Kincaid. She leaned forward on the railing. Silas Kincaid is not a rough guard. He is a better man than anyone in this room. And if loving the man who saved my life makes me improper, then I gladly accept the title. But do not let this criminal hide behind my reputation. The gavel banged, but the verdict was already written in the eyes of the jury. It took them less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. The judge, a man who had lost money in the railway scheme himself, showed no mercy. Alistair Stirling was stripped of his title. His assets seized to repay the debts, and he was sentenced to 20 years of hard labor in Dartmoor prison. Lady Genevieve had fled to Paris before the trial began, her reputation in tatters, never to return to London society. As Alistair was dragged away screaming that he was a peer of the realm, Isolde didn't watch him go. She looked to the back of the courtroom. Standing by the heavy oak doors, leaning heavily on a cane, was Silas. He was pale, and his arm was in a sling, but he was standing. He nodded to her. It was done. January 1st, 1890. The coast of Cornwall. The air was different here. Saltier. Cleaner. Isolde stood on the edge of the cliff, looking out at the churning grey Atlantic. The wind whipped her hair around her face, but she didn't mind. She liked the wildness of it. She was no longer the Countess of Hallowell. The annulment had been granted quietly by the church, given the circumstances of the non-consummation and Alistair's crimes. She was Isolde Calloway again. But she was not the destitute girl she had been. The Duke of Ashbourne, grateful for the clearing of his son's name, had settled a substantial sum on her. A dowry for the life you choose, he had called it. He had also accepted Silas's resignation. Isolde heard the crunch of boots on the gravel path behind her. She didn't turn. She knew the rhythm of those steps by heart. Silas stopped beside her. He was healing well. The cane was gone, though he still favored his left side when he was tired. He wore a heavy wool sweater and a rough coat, fisherman's clothes, not a uniform. "The cottage is ready," he said. "The roof held up against the wind last night." "Good," Isolde said, taking a deep breath of the sea air. "I like it here, Silas. No one knows who we are. No one cares about titles." "They know who you are," Silas corrected gently. "The village baker called you my lady this morning." "I told him to call me Isolde." "He won't," Silas chuckled. "You have a way of carrying yourself. You can take the girl out of the castle, but you can't take the castle out of the girl." Isolde turned to face him. The wind had put color in his cheeks. He looked younger, lighter, without the weight of the Duke's security on his shoulders. "And you?" she asked. "Do you miss it?" "The fight, the danger." Silas looked at her. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb rubbing over her knuckles. "I fought my whole life," he said softly. "I fought in the streets. I fought in the ring. I fought for the Duke. I thought that was all I was good for. Being a wall. Being a weapon." He stepped closer, blocking the wind for her, just as he had done that first night in the alley. "But then I saw you," he continued, "standing in the mud, looking like a porcelain doll that had been smashed. And I realized I didn't want to fight anymore. I wanted to build something. I wanted to protect something because I loved it, not because I was paid to." Isolde's heart hammered against her ribs. "And what do you love, Silas?" He didn't answer with words. He reached into his coat pocket. He didn't pull out a ring. He pulled out a small iron key. "It's not a diamond," he said, looking nervous for the first time in his life. "It's the key to the cottage. My name is on the deed, but I want yours to be next to it, not as a tenant, not as a guest." He looked her in the eye. "Isolde, I am not a duke. I have some savings, a strong back, and a bad shoulder. I cannot give you balls or operas. But I promise you this. You will never walk in the rain alone again. I will be your shelter. I will be your home. Will you marry me? For real this time?" Isolde looked at the key. It was heavy, cold iron. It wasn't gold. It wasn't flashy. It was solid. It was permanent. She took the key from his hand. She didn't hesitate. "I don't want a duke," she whispered. "I tried a duke. I want the man who knelt." She threw her arms around his neck. Silas caught her, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around on the cliff's edge with the roaring ocean below them. He buried his face in her neck, breathing her in. "Yes," she laughed into his shoulder. "Yes, Silas, yes." He set her down, but didn't let her go. He kissed her a long, slow kiss that tasted of salt spray and absolute, terrifying freedom. Far away in London, society was still whispering about the scandal. They whispered about the ruined countess and the guard. They called it a tragedy. But as Isolde stood in the circle of Silas's arms, watching the sun break through the clouds over the Atlantic, she knew the truth. It wasn't a tragedy. It was the only fairy tale that had ever been real. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Let's go home, Silas." "After you, my lady." He smiled. "No," she corrected, taking his hand and walking side by side with him toward the small stone cottage with the smoking chimney. "Not my lady, just Isolde, and just Silas." They walked away from the cliff, two figures against the vast horizon. As they reached the door, the first drops of a new rain shower began to fall. Silas stopped. He didn't curse the weather. He simply pulled his coat open, wrapping it around her, pulling her close against his side. They walked into the rain together, and this time neither of them felt the cold. The story of Isolde and Silas reminds us that true nobility isn't found in a bloodline, a title, or a bank account. It is found in character. Alistair Sterling had the world at his feet, yet he was a moral pauper. Silas Kincaid had nothing but his strength and his honor, yet he proved to be the true prince of the story. Isolde's journey from a pawn in a transaction to a woman who seized her own destiny is a testament to the power of self-worth. She learned that the most expensive thing you can ever own is your own freedom, and the most valuable gift you can receive is a love that asks for nothing but your safety. In the end, the rain that washed away her old life didn't destroy her. It watered the soil for something new, something real, and something unbreakable to grow. Thank you for listening to this story of betrayal, justice, and undying love. If Isolde's courage and Silas's loyalty moved you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. I have a question for you. If you were Isolde, would you have taken the risk to trust a stranger in a dark alley? Or would you have tried to return to the safety of the society that rejected you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more historical dramas, romances, and tales of karmic justice, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell. I'll see you in the next story. Goodbye.